evolutionary model that places all of NLP and neurosemantics under one umbrella of understanding. The 7-matrix model, developed by Dr. Michael Hall, places the meta-model of language, meta-programs, mind lines, known as sleight of mouth in NLP, and other linguistic structures, and all NLP and neurosemantic patterns under 7 categories. It provides both a diagnostic as well as a treatment tool.
Hi, my name is Michael Hall, and what you're about to see is the matrix of the mind. This is a new model that's just come out in neurosemantics in the spring of 2002, and as I record this in July of 2002, we have just finished making a presentation of it to those in the Master Practitioner track that we did here in Colorado. This was the 3rd presentation of the Matrix of the Mind and the 7 matrices. The first was in Sydney in May of this year, and the second was in Moscow in June. This 3rd presentation was the fullest presentation, and my associate Bob Bodenhammer created the PowerPoints design that you can see in this video as well as on our website. The matrix of the mind comes out of the frame games model that was developed 2 years ago in neurosemantics, which was a simplification of metastates that was developed in 1994, and of course that came out of the NLP model. So as you watch the matrix of the mind, this gives us a tool, a diagnostic tool, and a template for being able to deal with all the complexities that make up those of us who are neurosemantic creatures. This has been in the work for about 6 months. It came out of the frame games training that we've been doing. In your manuals, there is a diagram that Bob put in there. It's number 1, is the frame games model. And I'd like to start there and refer to that one because this is where the whole matrix model has grown up from. And you can see what we've done there is to use this multi-ordinal term of reference all the way up. That we start with a reference, and then I represent that reference, and then I use that reference as I think about that, because I have thoughts and feelings about that reference. What does that mean to me? And as I think about that, that becomes a frame of reference, how I frame my perception. And as I frame it that way and frame it that way again and again, it becomes a frame of mind. And then as that frame of mind becomes a frame of mind of a frame of mind of a frame of mind, it becomes the frameworks. So the whole matrix idea, and those of you who have been through frame games, this will seem very, very familiar in that sense. But when we meet a person on the street, when we encounter each other in the hallway, we don't see the matrix. It seems like the person is just the person, and I say something and you say something, stimulus response, and I don't see any matrix. And so at first the matrix is invisible. And so if you think about it in that way, that we meet a person, and there's stimulus, there's response back, I don't see any matrix, but we also know that person is in a state. And as that state becomes stronger and stronger, or more obvious, we spend a little time, we recognize that nobody is stateless, but everybody's in a state. And that is the heart of the matrix. So the very first question I want to always ask is, what state are you in? What state am I in? What is the state of mind, of emotion, of body? What is the state physiologically in terms of energy and health and fitness? And what is the state in terms of mind and perception? So we start to see the matrix when we start recognizing, oh, you're in a grumpy state. Oh, you're in a joyful state. You're in a playful state. You're in a teasing state. You're in a confident state. What state are you in? So the first thing that we start to recognize is state, and that stimulus response is being affected and influenced by the state. So this is where the matrix starts, and in fact, everything that's going to occur is going to occur and influence and texture that state. So all the matrix will be, to some extent, invisible, but what starts to have visibility for us is the state. So the very first line here, as we start thinking about neurosemantics and the construction of meaning, the matrix is a matrix of meaning. It is significance, because the meaning does not exist out there. We are meaning makers, and as we make this meaning, we create our own matrix. Like Neo in the movie, The Matrix, we live in this matrix, a mind, body, emotion matrix comprised of multiple embedded frames, and the matrix is our internal model of the world and is made up of these multiple frames and these belief frames. So here's an overview of it, and we're going to pull that apart and identify that piece by piece as we go through there. there's the core matrix, and that's the meaning-making matrix that we'll talk about. From the meaning-making matrix, then we create certain meanings that we tend to take with us everywhere we go. I never leave home without myself, and my concepts of self, and my beliefs about self, and my mappings and modeling of myself. I never leave home without a sense of, can I act in the world? Can I not act in the world? Do I have resources? Am I limited? Am I helpless? Am I powerful? So the matrix of power and resourcefulness and self-efficacy. I never leave home without a sense of time, because one of the concepts we always carry with us, since time does not exist out there, but as a concept of the mind, as I compare events that have happened, events that are happening, events that will happen, and so I bring a sense of time, whether I like time or don't like time. I also have maps that I've created meanings about other people. Are they friendly or are they unfriendly? Can I trust them or can I not trust them? What do I believe, and the meanings I've given to others, and my concepts of human nature, my concepts of people and others and relationships and my skills in that area. And then all my mapping about the territory, the worlds. The world of family, the world of school, the world of business, the world of career, the world of culture, the world of nations, all the different worlds. And so out of my meaning-making matrix, I make these other matrices, and they always seem to be just at ready availability to be activated. And sometimes something will happen, and they'll activate all of them at the same time. And inside of each of these matrices, there is another matrix that occurs, because as I have a sense of myself and something's occurring, I not only have mapped that, but I have a sense of I'm going to, so intention, purpose, agenda. Because I have attention in each matrix, and I have intention in each matrix. And so there's intention that'll float, as it were, above each of these matrices. Even above my meaning-making matrix, there's a sense of I'm doing this because. I'm doing this because. I'm doing this because I understand. I'm doing this because I want this. And so motivation, agenda, intention, purpose. And so those are the 7 matrices, and we're going to go through and look at them step by step. But it begins with, and it's grounded in. And the grounding in the state is really important, because that's what's going to ground the whole system. When the system becomes not grounded, then we start floating. And we start living more and more in our heads, and more our heads. And the ability to be sane, that is to make a good adjustment to the world, loosens, and we start going up in the head, and we can have all kinds of wild and wonderful and hallucinated matrix. It can be a wonderful place to live, but we just can't do anything effective with it. And so that is a description, as it were, of someone who has lost touch with reality, or their maps are not grounded. So the grounding in the primary state, a neurolinguistic state, is really critical. And so the grounding of the state. The foundation then of the matrix starts with our everyday states, these mind, body, emotion states that we never leave home without. These are neurological energy fields. So to use what we talk in NLP about state dependency, as this state gets stronger, then it's going to become more and more of a matrix. Every state is not a matrix. Every state does not activate a matrix. But if we go into a state and it gets strong, then the more energy, the more the whole rest of the matrix will be activated. And so it's an energy field, a neurological energy field that'll govern perception, communication, behavior, memory, imagination. And so that's the dynamic that as we work with anybody, we want to look for and identify and calibrate to the energy field. So these states are driven by frames of meaning, and that leads us to the very first matrix. Matrix grounding. You might want to ask, if you work with anybody, how grounded is this person in their primary state? What we call dissociation is a person not grounded. They're getting out of their body more and more, or they feel that they're getting out of their body. They feel numb. They feel disoriented. But they feel. It's just a different kind of a feeling. They feel weird. They feel spinning. They feel disembodied. But those are more concepts because they're becoming less and less grounded. So the matrix is grounded in a neurosemantic state. Each of the matrices inform and influence the cinema. So we introduce the cinema Of course, this comes from NLP, the cinema of the mind, what we're representing. And in this cinema, everything else that's going to happen is going to keep informing this. Because the feedback loop that we feed back to the higher levels of our mind feed back to this. And sometimes we feed it directly to the cinema. Sometimes we feed it to other ideas and thoughts, and then it feeds it back. But everything shows up in the cinema. So in the cinema, you can find the part of the whole. The whole will show up in the part of the cinema. So the holons are in the cinematic features, and in the movie, and in the quality of the movie, and the size of the movie. And so the movie becomes really, really important. Bob and I have put in User's Manual of the Brain, Volume 2, a lot about the cinema. In NLP, we've called it the back. But to make this more dynamic and dramatic, we're going to call it the cinema, the movie of the mind. And we've got all kinds of channels. We have the visual, we have the auditory, that's obvious. But we've got a movie theater in the mind that's like no other movie theater on the planet. Because we can step into the movie. It's a holodeck. The holodeck on the Starship Enterprise doesn't compare to this one because it's also got smell channels, taste channels, vestibular system channels, so that it's informing the body. It's sending signals and command for how to feel, how to be. So the movie becomes really critical, and this is the magic of NLP, dealing with representation and the power of representation in that movie. So it informs, and we've separated that term there, informs, because the form that you're going to feel in your body, this embodiment, this incorporation, so our thoughts are embodied thoughts. George Lakoff and Mark Johnson, in their latest book, I think it was dated 2000, Philosophy in the Flesh, is the linguistic structure of what we're talking about here, that it's embodied and informing and influencing the cinema. As states go meta, they stay. The staying of states. Most of the time, states just come and go. Stimulus response, and attentions, and we move in and out of states. But we can make a state stay, and the staying of the state, and they stay, they become the matrices of the mind. So as we move up, and we do that repeatedly, we create this matrix or that matrix, and they start staying, and that's what we mean by metastates and the solidification, the stabilization of states. States are invisible when we first encounter them. We don't see them. We don't see the matrix. And if we don't know the matrix, then just like in the movie, the matrix has us. And so wake up. The matrix has you, Neo. Is really a biography for all of us. That if you don't know it, so awareness of the matrix is the first step. Interesting enough, in the movie The Matrix, Morpheus says to Neo, "A feeling has brought you to me. A feeling that something is wrong with the world." Well, isn't that what brings us into self-awareness, into consciousness? Something is wrong with our world. And he says it's like a splinter in the mind, driving you mad. So that'll wake us up to the matrix. That our map is not fitting. Our map does not help us have a good adjustment to the world. Korzybski introduced the word unsanity. And I can't tell you how many editors have tried to edit that out of my works. Where's unsanity in the dictionary? But unsane means we just do not have a good adjustment to reality, that there's a splinter in our mind driving us mad. But unsane is what we would call neurosis, just full of nerves. Neurosis. Nervous. And nervous, neurosis, neurotic is a state when something is wrong with the world. My map is not giving me a good adjustment so I can take effective action. Psychosis is the technical psychiatric term for I'm floating. I'm floating. And so we say that people build castles in the air and psychologists charge rent. The matrix within. So the first and most important matrix is the meaning matrix. And so as we look at the matrix within, recognizing the meanings and the framings that create our internal world, this enables us to see these invisible matrices of the mind. They're made up of the internal world of frames, and this overall matrix of the mind is made up of thoughts and feelings and physiology, what Bob and I have been emphasizing as just the stuff that we think with, and that's what creates everything. The matrix movie becomes a critical part. We just mentioned we map the world inside as we represent the mental movies of our mind, and these then create our states. Above and beyond our internal cinema are all the frames of meaning that influences the movie. And so we've been talking about that in metastates and neurosemantics, that it's these frames that frame the movie. So we have our editorial frame, we have our director frame, we have our producer frame, and as we start framing the movies, we start influencing the movie. And so we call it submodalities. Is it close? Is it far? I'll edit it that way. I'll edit it with some music, some soundtrack, some words. And so we start editing the movie. I'll step into the movie and be the actor, or I'll step out of the movie and be an observer, spectator, or the editor, adjusting the lens of my camera, or the director telling whatever's going to go on in that movie, or the producer who wants to produce it. So these are the levels of the mind that we can function from, and each of these influence that movie. Meanings drive states. Well, that's obvious. We all know that. This is the cognitive behavioral understanding that meanings drive the states. As we map things, we generate meanings that encode into our movies that creates our states. In our states, it is the meanings or the frames that count. So what is an emotion? The motion, the E-motion, you could think of it as the evaluative motion. That's what an emotion is. Because I move and I act in whatever I do. I relax, and that's the motion, because I'm thinking something evaluatively like relaxing. I get fearful or dreadful, and that's the motion, because I'm thinking and evaluating scary, threatening, dangerous. So every motion of the body in the soma is going to be the result of some evaluation or meaning. And so you take away the meaning of something and you feel different. In the phobia cure, we run the movie backwards, and when you take syntax and mess it up and run something backwards, it takes the meaning out of it. Read any English sentence backwards, that's not meaningful. I don't know what that means. And when you don't know what it means, it takes away the emotion, which is why running it backwards de-energizes the emotions and neutralizes the emotions and reduces it, because we've changed meaning, and meaning is also made out of syntax. So in states, the meanings are frames that count. When a stimulus occurs, we frame things that activate a state that evokes feelings and behaviors, and with that, the game begins, and we move to the meaning matrix. Here's a diagram of the meaning matrix, and while we've separated out and sorted 5 levels, it's all the same stuff, but there's 5 levels there. The first level is the cinema, because one way I make meaning is to associate sights and sounds and sensations, or the cinema. I see things. What do you see? Well, what do you remember about it? What do you think about that? What do you hear inside the theater of your mind? And if I'm thinking about a traumatic event that once occurred and I'm representing it, at some level, that associative meaning, that represented meaning, that cinematic representation, is what it means to me. So the cinematic representation, the representation. As I do that, I'm also classifying. What is this? What do I call this? How do I label this? This is hurt. This is insult. This is pleasure. This is delight. So I classify. This is stuttering. This is, and so I name it, and it becomes that to me. And it starts punctuating the world. And if you don't punctuate failure, but you punctuate it as feedback, you create a different kind of meaning. So some of meaning is how we frame it originally. So we frame it with the cinema. We frame it with the classification. The linking of emotions is part of meaning making, because as I do that, I feel something, and I associate a sensation with it. I feel happy, I feel sad, I feel relaxed, I feel tense. And so we bring a thought or feeling or a metastate to that, and that's part of meaning making. Meaning making in that sense at the primary level is this happens, they use a certain tonality, and I feel threatened. So I bring a sense of threat or endangerment to that stimulus, and it gets connected. Then I keep playing it, cinematic representation, and then I call this put down, insult, denying my sense of self-worth and value, and this creates that meaning, and then I feel bad about that, or I feel ashamed about that, or I feel upset about that, or frustrated. So the association or the linking of emotions. We also make meaning by evaluating. And of course, there's evaluations in these first ones, but we evaluate. We look at it in a certain way. Yesterday, we looked at the 3 Ps of learned helplessness: personal, pervasive, and permanent. That's a way of evaluating. How should I evaluate this bad thing? Well, it's about me. It's going to last forever, and it's about everything. That's a way of evaluating. We call that the pessimistic attribution style. And if you have that style of evaluating, you move through the world and you evaluate. That way, you can move through the world, and any crappy thing that happens out there, you bring it in, represent it, label it, and evaluate it as about me, forever, about everything. And so that evaluative style is how we create meaning and set all those frames. And of course, in all of this, we are framing. The evaluation shows up as cause-effect. This makes me. As mind reading, she's trying to do this on purpose to hurt me. Mind reading. Complex equivalence, when he or she uses this tone of voice, it is put down. Identification, this is what I am. This is who I am. I am a failure. Or I am a sensitive person to tones of voice. And so identification. When we move up to framing and presuppositions, metaphors, non-propositional language, then we are framing things in that way. All of this is framing. And we call this the meaning-making core, and the most important matrix of them all. It's all one thing, and yet it has different facets. Why we've teased out the 5 different facets of it. But this is the meaning-making core that it's how our brains work. We can't stop our brains from associating emotions with things, representing things, labeling and framing. So these 5 terms really all describe the same core matrix. It's the engine. Since meaning doesn't exist out there, we are meaning makers, and this is what we're doing. So we can see people classifying. We can hear them classifying. You can listen to the meta model and listen to how they're labeling or evaluating. And we've got the meta model distinctions that allow us to hear that kind of meaning making. If you don't hear it, you might see it in their bodies. You see what they're doing state-wise in terms of what state are they going in response to any stimuli. And that's meaning-making. And you can peek into the theater of their mind. What in God's name are you representing in your head? And how are you representing it? That's meaning-making. So all of this framing and framing in embedded loops is the meaning-making matrix. And this is the one that we can't turn off. Because to be alive is to feel about things, and to have language in our consciousness is to give it names. And as we get more complex and mature as in our consciousness, we have cause-effect and causation and complex equivalence and all these other things. So this is the meaning-making matrix. We make meaning at many levels, so it's multi-level. We do it through associations, classifications, framings, evaluations. It begins with the primary state, making associations. So we associate, and you can see we see babies associating. And this is where the first model of the world. If a baby is born and is not taken care of, it's not cuddled, it's not loved, it's not touched a lot, it will have a feeling of being disconnected, of not being touched, not being loved, have sensory stimulus deprivation. And we now know from studies and research that sensory deprivation will cause a child not to thrive, and the child will die, even though its food and liquid needs are met. It needs to be loved. So here's a feeling of just disconnectedness, and that starts to create some of those early meanings. And so it starts with state. That's why the state is so foundational, and we ground it with state. And this is where Erik Erikson's psychosocial stages become real useful. Getting through autonomy, trust is one of the first one, autonomy, and the psychosocial state of development that we have these feelings and these experiences that we connect with whatever the stimulus is. From there, we make a meta move to frame, classify, and evaluate. Our reflexivity creates the meaning-making funnel. So we're going to describe this as a funnel. So we're in a state, we've got our theater of the mind moving, responding to whatever event or stimulus in the world there is, and we make meaning, and there's a meaning funnel, and it's reflexivity that takes us up these levels. And while we've separated out these different terms, this is the meaning-making funnel and the loops of the mind that goes round and round, because as soon as we make this meaning, we have thoughts and feelings about that, and thoughts and feelings about that. And so this is the winds of the mind as it moves up in that reflexivity. So the funnel that we take everywhere with us is a metastating funnel. It's a metastating funnel, because in metastating we are associating, we are linking, we are framing, we're evaluating, and it all shows up in the cinema. So this is the core and the most important thing. And in coaching, working with people, leading, therapy, we want to know, how do you make meaning? Rational emotive therapy comes in to look at thinking patterns. Well, they're on the right track. What are the thinking patterns? The thinking patterns all along this line all the way up are meta-programs. And you do that thinking pattern often enough, and it becomes a filter for how we look at the world. And of course, it's languaged, that's the meta model, and it shows up in the cinema, that's submodalities or the cinematic features. The metastating is actually the dynamic, the mechanism that makes it happen, which is why metastating then becomes the central facet and reflexivity. So the meaning-making funnel, we create meaning matrix, and from this we create the other matrices. So out of this matrix, we'll pop off and have thoughts and feelings about our sense of self, about our sense of power, about our sense of time. And it comes out of this one. And so it is the meaning-making matrix that creates the other matrices of the mind. This allows us to stabilize our highest metastates so that they become our frames of mind or attitude. And attitude is such a dynamic word, such a holistic word. Attitude means a posture of the mind, a predisposition of the mind, and posture of the body, which is why you can see an attitude. You can see a person with a chip on his shoulder. You can see a person who has a positive attitude and they're bubbling. It's a posture of the body because of the posture of the mind. And so what we hold in mind, and the word hold in mind, that's what meaning means. Meaning, from old German word, means to hold in mind. So as we create all this meaning, we hold things in mind. We hold thoughts and feelings about self, thoughts and feelings about our effectiveness and our resourcefulness, thoughts and feelings about time, others, the world, and intentions. And as we hold that in mind, then the matrix comes into being, this invisible matrix comes into being, and so these six essential matrices: self, power, time, other, world, and intention. But it all starts from the meaning-making matrix. The self-organizing nature of the matrix. We've talked about self-organizing and self-organization and attractors being the way systems work, and this is a neurosemantic system. And so the core meaning matrix is what's going to create these other ones. These embedded frames work as self-organizing attractors. So how you make meaning and your attribution style, the optimistic style, the pessimistic style, and all the other thinking styles, counting, discounting. So we take those thinking styles in that meaning-making funnel, and if you have a style of making meaning of that doesn't count, that doesn't count, that doesn't count, that doesn't, and you move through life, you can discount yourself, discount your power, discount your intentions. There's no purpose, there's no meaning. If you make the meaning of counting, which is why appreciation is so important. Appreciating self, appreciating my powers, appreciating what I can do, appreciating time, and treating time as a precious commodity. I've got this day and I've got my future. Appreciating others, appreciating the world, having appreciative intentions. So the meaning making in the matrix is going to activate and create and stabilize all the other matrices that we carry with us. The neurosemantic energy in the movie The Mind, we experience our awareness in terms of the movie. What's on your mind? When you ask that question, most of the time it's just that immediate facet of the movie of what I'm thinking. And we're not aware of the canopy of consciousness, the matrices that's feeding it, informing it. We're just aware of the holons immediately in our mind, on our mind, that we're in response to. We call these submodalities, and they work semantically, encoding the meanings in sensory-based terms. So what's on our mind and what we see and hear, we stay in our mind in that movie. And that's why when we fool with the submodalities and fool with these cinematic features, it can affect the whole matrix. And if it doesn't affect the whole matrix, then sometimes we have to go and set a frame that allow those cinematic features to change and alter. So the levels of our mind, here is thinking about it, looking at it from the standpoint of a movie, the cinema, editing the movie. We could also have spectating or witnessing, observing the movie as an observer. The cinematic perspectives, what is the camera shot? Are we up close and in front? Are we way in the back? Do we have a fisheye view of it? What perspective? So this is perceptual positions, cinematic features. How are you looking at that movie? In the last year or so, I've been watching lots of movies from that standpoint. What is the cameraman doing? Where's the cameraman going? Is the cameraman on a helicopter zooming around, or is the cameraman on a little track and moving in and out, zooming in and out with a cinematic perspective? The director, the producer. So this is movie mind, and we all have a movie mind. And when you step into your movie, when the movie becomes all in all of your experience, you're inside the movie, associated, the actor. But which actor? Are you yourself or are you somebody else? And so we step into movies and we can take different positions inside the movie, and we can step outside the movie. And so this is the movie mind. Another facet of the matrix is the psychologics of it. We've been talking about that for several days now. The psychologics. And that's hyphenated, psychologics, which makes us all psychologicians, to use Krzyzewski's term, psychologicians. Not a psychologist, I'm a psychologician. Because I'm looking at how the logics inside make sense. It makes psychological sense as we construct this and embed frames within frames. It always makes sense on the inside. That's one of the principles from NLP. It's a principle of semantics. It always makes sense on the inside. Every meta move sets a higher frame as a logical level, and so creates these internal matrices. And that's that classification. What do you call that? What is that to you? How do you think about that? What does that mean to you? And so the psychologics that move up as we layer. Now that we have this funnel, this meaning-making core at the very center, now from that core comes our thoughts and feelings about ourself. Self at the primary level we're unaware of. And when we lose our mind and come to our senses, we have no sense of self. That's the genius pattern. That's what allows us to really be at our best. Because we lose our mind and we come to our senses. Let a rock climber climb a cliff of a rock constantly self-conscious, and that person's not going to be very effective and could endanger him or herself. Let a public speaker become conscious of self, and then it's not about the audience, it's not about the participant, it becomes kind of egocentric. But when we lose a sense of self, and just we're there, present, the matrix of self has been clicked off. It's there, but it's just deactivated. And so that's what we mean by getting the ego out of the way. And then we're cleaner, we're freer, we're more pure in our presentation. The ego's out of the way, and we have lost our mind and come to our senses to be fully present with something. But when we are conscious of ourselves and when we start building up our self maps, and we build up so many multiple sense of self, myself in the eyes of others is probably the first mapping we do. Who am I in your eyes? Who am I in my caretaker's eyes? That's how I start building my first map of self. Do they like me? Do they think I'm good, I'm kind, I'm lovable, I'm worth it? Or, wish you weren't born. Just get on my, you're such a bother. Well, we take that and we map that. And that becomes the first mappings of self. And then I take that with me everywhere I go, seeing the world in those terms, because I've made that meaning. And maybe I have that movie. And I've classified, and I've evaluated. And so I hold that in mind everywhere I go, seeing myself in those terms. And so who am I in the eyes of others, my self-awareness at that first level. And then we make all kinds of maps in terms of worth, value, lovability, preciousness, being a somebody. Maybe I do it conditionally. Most of us in most cultures will do it conditionally rather than unconditionally. And then there's the question of what can I do? Confidence and whatever skills. Well, when we're born, we can't do anything. We can't even wipe our bottoms. We can't even feed ourselves. And if our caretakers nurture and love us and give us lots of comfort and security that that's okay, and we slowly develop some things and get lots of validation and affirmation that we can move and we can grab and we can smile and we get rewarded, then we have a sense of confidence. I can do this, and now I can do this, and now I can do this. The self matrix. And so we have self-worth, self-esteem, conditional, unconditional, self-confidence, self-competence, social self, self-definition. How do I define myself? Self-image, my sense of conscience, my ego strength. But there's hundreds of other selves. Myself as someone who plays. Because my experience as a child, and whether I was welcome to play, or whether I had a whole bunch of older siblings who didn't want me to be a part of the play, or my position in the life, the position in the family, whether I'm firstborn, middleborn, lastborn, or somewhere. Myself gender-wise, male and female. Myself cultural-wise. Myself intellectually. Myself emotionally. Myself with my hobbies, with my school. So all kinds of things of self start to create this self matrix that I just carry with me everywhere I go. And most of us appear in adult life with some really defective and limiting and impoverishing maps of self. Did anybody here appear in adult life with just the perfect matrix of yourself well mapped out? I did. So it's human nature for us, because we got a kid's brain when we made all those maps. And we drew the best conclusion we can, but we thought like a child. And cognitive development was what Piaget studied, and how children slowly grow out of the concrete thinking stage into pre-formal operational stage, and then operational stage, and more conceptual stage, and our thinking matures. And if our thinking doesn't mature, we're still making maps in that meaning-making matrix like a child. And so that can be a big problem. That first of all we have to change the funnel, the metastating funnel of how we think, so that we can think better and quit thinking like a child. Because you think like a child, your matrices will have more childish, infinite, and regressive tendencies. But one matrix we carry everywhere where we go, ready to be activated at any moment, is self. And most of us have learned to think about self conditionally. I'm not a somebody, but if I can do this and that, when I accomplish here, if only. So we play those tapes. If, when, and if only. And so our self-esteem can so easily get put on the line by personalizing and not having an enriched matrix of self, so that the self I carry with me, I like, and I celebrate, and I enjoy, and I esteem. I'm a somebody. I don't have to prove anything. And so we say that I'm a card-carrying member of the human race. And as we move out that way, then this is the paradox. It takes a lot of self-esteem to be humble. It takes a lot of self-esteem to be humble. It's not the bully on the playground is not the one with self-esteem, but insecurity, and needs to prove something. But once we map that with our meaning-making matrix, so that I can see the me for whom that's not a problem, and I start defining myself not in terms of my thoughts or emotions or speech and behavior. I disidentify with that. Those are just expressions of me. What I'm about are these values and these hopes and these dreams and and these values and these visions. That's who I am and what I am becoming. So we have a map that allows us to take our self, and it's a map that allows that self matrix to be well formed. And so how have you metastated yourself? And that's why we always start with self-esteem, self-acceptance, self-appreciation. And it establishes that first foundation, since we never leave home without our sense of self. So there's the self matrix. And if it's well formed, if you've got some really great meanings in there, it's not going to get activated a lot. You won't be very self-conscious. In fact, you'll be un-self-conscious. And think about that as a state. Un-self-conscious. And when someone asks you, who are you? You go, I don't know. Does it make any difference? Because you're unself-conscious, and there's something of it's like a little child before they build the self, and they're unself-conscious, and there's a form of innocence and delightfulness and freshness and that kind of naivety that's there. Well, we can recover that and have a childlike attitude just moving through the world and not over-identifying. It was Korzybski who said that identification itself is the foundation of all unsanity, which is why Bob and I, for a few years, wrote the books in E prime to get away from is, I am, he is, they are, to free us up from that box and just release that box, that we don't need that box, that I don't know who I am, but I'm having an experience, and sometimes I think, and sometimes I feel, and sometimes I say and do, and I have this experience and that experience, and these are the experiences of life as I move through life. And so it's a more well-formed self, and when you do that, then your self matrix won't get activated by very much. But you have a self that you can see yourself developing and growing and becoming more and having more fun and being more loving and being more compassionate and being more creative. And then your self won't get in the way. So a lot of times, the very first matrix we need to deal with in coaching, therapy, management, relationship is a sense of self so that it can settle and rest and we can be okay. So we have the swish pattern, we have disidentification patterns, we have self-esteeming patterns, we have lots of patterns to deal with that. Maybe clearing out the past, the dragon slaying, the re-imprinting, the phobia solution, so as to become okay with me. And you can always test that. Go inside and say, I give myself permission to enjoy myself and to appreciate myself and to be a somebody, and see if that settles well, or if some other matrix gets activated that prevents that. And so that's how we think about the matrix, to use the matrix, the self matrix, as we move through. Well, the next matrix is the power matrix, very close to self, but still different from self. The power matrix. This has to do with a sense of the ability to take action. So we do metastates with the power zone. We've got 4 basic powers. In responding to the world, I have the power to think, to imagine, to use my brain to represent, to solve problems, to ask questions. So the power, the mental powers, the emotional powers, to feel, to care, to value. So all the emotional powers. Those are the private powers, and now on the outside I speak and behave, my public powers, to take action, to make a difference. And so we claim these powers. It's one of the first psychosocial stages of a child. And if a child isn't allowed to exercise its power, but is restrained or punished a lot, the child just learns, can't do anything. It's like the dogs of Segelman on the electrified grid. Nothing I do makes a difference. So in parenting, we want children at the infant level to know that what they do does make a difference, and to have that feeling deep inside. What I do makes a difference. And it can be as simple as playing with the child and recognizing that the child, with smiling and giggling, can get responses from us. Because the worst thing is to go by and not notice, which happens in hospitals, oftentimes of orphanages, that the child is well taken care of, but just not interacted with. And the sense of power. And the mapping. I can do something. So we do a lot of validation for children, and validating that you can do something. And we build up that map. Well, if we miss that, and if when we took our powers to say no, for that individualizing or yes or getting excited, and somehow that was punished, or pain or distressful states was attached to that, then we learn I can't do anything. Doesn't make a difference. We make maps be seen and not heard. We make other kinds of maps, and what we're doing is reducing our power. So the sense of resources and resourcefulness and self-efficacy, I can trust my brain to figure things out. I can trust my emotions that they're signals about how I'm experiencing the world. And so the self one, the power one, is what we do in NLP as we start accessing more states of resourcefulness and being able to turn on our states and turn off our states, because they're emotional states driven by our thoughts. And we coach our body for speech and behavior, new behavior generator. And what kind of resource would you want? Have you ever had that? Can you imagine what that would be like? And what we're doing is getting a greater sense of power and effectiveness to do something. There may be cultural frames. This is where you can hear it in language. I can't do that. That's impossible. I couldn't even see myself doing that. And we see self matrix and power matrix working very closely together. And so for a sense of empowerment and a sense of responsibility and proactivity, the power matrix is something we carry with us everywhere we go. And anything that happens, the first question is, can I handle it? And when you think about that statement, can I, self matrix, handle it? And if your answer is, yeah, I'll figure out something, then you've got a map that is fairly enriching and empowering, so that, okay, what can I do? How can I do it? And we're solution oriented. But if the first question is, that's too much, I feel stressed here, and we haven't really trusted ourselves. So one of the psychosocial stages of Erikson is self-trust, and trust in caretakers, and then trust of self. But it's hard for me to learn how to trust myself if someone else doesn't trust me. So one of the ways we keep people infants and infantilized, even as adults, is we treat them like they don't have a brain and can't do anything. And in business, the infantilization of people in labor or people in management, wherever, if they're treated like, you got to check everything with us, it takes away power. It depowers them. It disempowers them. And so this matrix here is all about the sense that I can deal with the world. Well, once again, we come back to neurosis and psychosis. If you feel like you can't handle it, you'll be full of nerves. It'll feel dangerous. The world will seem like a dangerous place, and you'll want to avoid. But if you have a sense of power, then you'll approach, and you'll just, I'll figure it out. I'll invent it as I go. And you'll have a sense of trusting your self-efficacy to take action. So when we meet someone and they're in that state, we know which matrix now to deal with. They need some empowerment before they can move on. So the empowerment matrix. Yesterday we talked about a sense of responsibility for. Another way to disempower is to assume too much responsibility and not have good boundaries, because if I'm responsible for everything that goes out there, then I'm going to be really hesitating and fearful, and I don't know. But if I can cut that and give people also the right to make their responses. Everybody's got the right to think whatever they want to think and say whatever they say, their own voice, their own heart, their own behaviors. And when I respect that and honor that, it empowers them. But when I take responsibility for them, I really disempower my own self and invite them into a more infantile state of being. But when I have responsibility for and responsibility to, knowing one is accountability, one is relationship, it really allows me to be in that empowered zone. Because I don't need to take responsibility for anybody else. And that frees me up so I can focus on my own. So that's the power matrix. The time matrix is another one that we all know from NLP, the time zones, past, present, future, the time zones. The time zones has to do with where in your mind do you live. And of course, a lot of times when the past was not pleasant, when the past was not completed, and there was not closure in a way that I really liked it, we tend to still live there, trying to finish that business, playing that movie again and again and again. And of course, keep playing it again and again, it'll just keep reinforcing it. And the meaning making is that, yes, this is true. This is worse than I thought. And it's going to be the future. It's going to be It's always going to be this way. Other people live in the present, and they won't learn from the past. They won't plan for the future, because that's what the past is for, learning, and the future is for planning. And so they live so much in the moment, it's immediate gratification. Well, that's another time zone. People who live in the future can miss the now, and because they're always anticipating, they're always wondering or worrying, and so the emotions of time, anger and fear and depression about what has happened, immediate gratification and impatience for the present. So we can even hear and recognize states that are time states, worry and anticipation and hope, or being overwhelmed by the future. So we start playing with the timeline. But there's other things we map about time. We may be in time, that is, we don't have awareness of time, so we're not met to time, and we're just in it and lost in it, and therefore operate more in a random way without sequencing and planning, and therefore cannot be well organized. Or we can be meta to time and aware of time, and sometimes don't give ourselves permission fully just to experience an experience, because we're always, what's next, what's next, what's next? We're making good time. So through time and in time can be that. Then we can have a bad relationship to time in the sense of, I don't like time, I wish I had more time, and metastate ourselves with those kinds of feelings, or metastate ourselves with the sense of time is my concept and is under my command, and I can slow time down, psychological time, I can speed time up. I can use my past for my learnings, and I can de-energize old memories that I don't need to be carrying around in my video arcade. I can use time to plan well-formed outcomes and have a sense of direction. So the time matrix. And if I have an ill-formed sense of self is not well-formed, and I don't even like myself, I wish I'd get away from myself, and I don't have much power, we'll tend to live in the past time zone. So there'll be correspondences between this. The more I live in the past, the weaker my sense of self moving into and becoming more of who I can become. So there's correspondences between these first three matrices, and of course all of it is created by the meaning-making matrix, and each creates intentions. If my self is not well formed, my intent may be, I'm going to become a somebody. So the intention metaphor matrix at the self level, I'm going to get attention. I'm going to become a somebody. And then what we do isn't pure for whatever the activity is. We're using the activities, using people, to take care of ourself, or with power, or with time. And so there's intentions with each of those. The power one is powerfulness, resourcefulness. How can I cope with the world? And this will govern how we approach or avoid the events. Okay.
Let's take a break. 15 minutes.
10 minutes.
10 minutes.
All right. So now we're going to complete the other parts of the matrix, the other, the world, and intentions. The other, or people matrix, we make meanings about people. Who they are, whether they're a threat or not, whether we can effectively relate to them. So this matrix is going to govern all the things that we know and feel with regard to social skills, relational skills, working with and through people. It's going to affect all of our thoughts and feelings and mappings about ethnic and cultural groups, communities, politics, persuasion, anything that has to do with groups of people. And as a social animal, we do form groups and hierarchies, and then there's the emotions that are parts of the other one, from influence to persuasion, to trust, to betrayal, to love, to compassion, to nurturing. All of the emotions and mappings with regard to other people and connection and bonding, and whether we think we deserve that, deserve to be loved, know how to love or to receive love. So it's about affection and just everything that we've mapped about other people. And since how I see myself reflected in the eyes of others, the other matrix is going to affect the self matrix. And whether I can cope with that world of other is going to affect my power matrix. And my time matrix is going to be affected in terms of who have been the significant people of my life, how healthy or toxic have they been, and what have I mapped from that, and then concluding from there into the future and my relationship with others. So this is all about others and my awareness of others, my consciousness of others. If we want to do effective coaching, therapy, managing, leading, interacting with others, then our skills for working with others and through others. And whether we have maps for win-win, or if it's win-lose, if it's competitive, if it's cooperative, if we have a sense of abundance or a sense of scarcity, if we make distinctions and discriminations between kinds of people, so all the cultural frames that come in, and whether we can operate with equality and mutuality, or whether the only way we can function there, the more insecure we are in the self matrix, then the more we probably need to control others and not really give them the freedom to be who they are and have their voice and their mind and their emotions and their choices of responses. So this is a very significant matrix, and we carry it with us everywhere we go, and it seems to get activated anytime you meet another human being. Imagine that. Or even when you're just thinking about others, because most of the time we're playing our lives to some audience. What audience are you playing your life to? And it may not even be living people. It may be people that you have known. And so tomorrow when we get into the cultural matrix, and as we get into cultural modeling and the social panorama, we're going to explore the panorama, Friday we'll do that, the panorama of our mind about other people, and how that influences us, and that matrix, and how it gets activated, and how to turn it on, how to turn it off, how to care about other people without feeling responsible for everything they say and do, and having some of those distinctions. So, very crucial one. During the teenage years, we tend to use the other matrix of friendship, of buddies, of groups, of gangs, to really define a lot of ourself. Because we do tend to use who we're connected with as part of our self-definition and our sense of self. And so the other matrix. The world matrix, or the territory matrix, is a general matrix for just everything out there. What's out there? And what is it like out there? Is it friendly? Do we live in a friendly universe or a dangerous, threatening universe? And of course, that's going to really affect our self and our power matrix. Is it friendly? Is it unfriendly? This matrix maps how we've created meanings about all these different worlds. The world of work and career and activity and significance and meaning. The world of hobbies and recreations, and the world of music, and the world of culture, and the financial world, and just all the worlds. What's out there and how have we mapped it, and which worlds do we feel confident to deal with and interact with. So the world, it can be the world of physics. How does the physical world work? How does the psychological world work? The sociological world. So all the mappings of what's out there, the world matrix, and this gives us our world view and our sense of the universe that we live in, or the cultures we live in, or how expansive is our world, or how much power. So whatever we've mapped about the world then affects, obviously, about others, about a sense of power, sense of self. This shows one of the systemic features of all these matrices, that it's not either or. Are you in the self matrix, or are you in the world matrix? It's both and. And sometimes it's all seven at the same time, flashing, activated, going on. When that happens, we're swimming. We are swimming in all of these thoughts and feelings. And someone says, "What are you thinking?" and it is spinning around, and we're in that swim. And that it's like our whole world, our whole matrix is activated. And if it's activated and aligned, we can be very powerful. But if it's activated and in conflict and putting us into a spin, and disabling us to be effective in what we do, then that whole matrix, the more pain, it's like the increase of pain level, the more that is activated and not pleasant. We've mentioned the intention or purpose matrix, and this comes from the neurosemantic division between attention and intention. And because we can divide thought always between what's on your mind, what's in the back of your mind, what's your purpose, what's your intent, every matrix has an intent. And so one of the diagrams has a little floating cloud of intention above every matrix. Because every matrix that gets activated, I have some purpose, some reason, some motivation, some intention. What is my intent? And whatever intention I have an intention about that, and an intention about that. And that has certain qualities and features, whether I give myself permission to be intentional and purposeful and directive, or whether somehow that's not okay or not bad, or maybe I've metastated it with a sense of powerlessness. So intention above each and every one, and that's where we can have our intentions really in conflict. Trying to do one thing in one matrix and trying to do something in a different matrix. Maybe in the self matrix, if I feel real insecure, I'm trying to get security and love and recognition. But in the other one, I'm trying to be thoughtful and considerate and trying to do it at the same time, and maybe it's in conflict. So intention and intentionality. And when all of this is activated, then the invisible becomes visible. And we start seeing the matrix. We see the internal semantics that are activated, because it's all about meaning, it's all about frames, and the matrix becomes visible as it's activated by an event or information. So from a system standpoint, information comes in, data comes in, an event comes in, a stimulus comes in, and we work it. We work it over, we deal with it, and then we respond. And we have a general principle that if the response seems to be really inappropriate to the stimulus, then it's really not about the stimulus, but it's about where we've gone in our brain and what matrices have been activated and what places. But it always makes sense. It's always psychological. But it's information that activates it. And then we send information up the levels of our mind as we make meaning out of it. And as we make meaning about how we're representing things, about self, about our sense of power, about time, this spiraling of the mind, the reflexivity, is going to be activating these concepts, these conceptual states that stay with us. These matrices of the mind build up with all kinds of layering and logical levels. And not only do we go in this direction and have this feedback feed forward that is activating our body and incorporating feelings and experiences inside, putting us more and more into state, but our mind is also going directly to the self matrix and feeding back, and going directly to the sense of resourcefulness matrix and feeding back. So we not only have one meta feedback loop with meaning, but we have 7 others. And so no wonder we can get into a swim. And when we put all of this together, we have swim spot. This is the spot, this is the place where it all spins. And we swim. Or, as Peter said the other day, it's the top swims. As a way of remembering it. But this is the way it all spins as it's moved around. And so now we've got the system loops of the matrix. We actually have 8 very major, significant feedback, feed-forward loops in this whole system. And we mentioned earlier that feedback is information and energy. Feedback is information and energy, the metabolism. And then feed-forward is behavior and embodiment. That's what happens neurosemantically inside of us. First of all, it's data, and then it's energy. Because that's what we're doing when we meditate ourselves. We're taking strong feelings and mental energy and emotional energy, and we're setting frames. And when it comes back down, it's becoming embodiment. It's becoming incorporation inside of our very flesh and tissue and muscle, and then it becomes behavior. So that's what happens neurosemantically to us as these systems are activated. And on this diagram, we have input, we have throughput, and we have output. which is to utilize some systems language. Input, throughput, and output. When we model, we are looking for the throughput. What is going on inside? Where is your brain gone? What have you been swimming around? Because everything is state-based, this is not a matrix. This is just the state that gets informed and influenced by everything else. But this state is really critical because all of this informs the state and creates this state. And this state is the state out of which we then operate. And if there's such a thing as state dependency, then this is metastate dependency or matrix dependency, that the behaviors, the speech, the thoughts, the feelings that come out, the expressions are coming out of this state, which is why the matrix of any given specific experience is dependent upon this state. So one of the tricks that we have in neurosemantics and NLP is somebody says, I have panic attacks. And we say, okay, just panic all over the floor right now. And the trick is they're not in the right state to activate that whole matrix. Well, I can't do it just now. I just have to work up to it. Okay, we'll work up to it. So we access, state accessing, we access the right state to go there. Think about a time, what would it be like if? And once they could activate the right state, then that matrix can come into being. But it can't come into being just now. So we have this trick. Somebody says, I've been depressed for 16 years. And we say, okay, I want you to come over here, put your head on the floor, put your legs up on the wall, and stand on your head for a bit. Now, feel depressed. They can't get it going when they're in that state. Because matrices are grounded by the state. This is the state, the matrix grounding. And this is also how we can now start changing and deframing some of the matrices by starting at a state where it can't be activated. But then we can find, okay, what state do you need to be in to be activated? Where do you first go? How do you represent it? What are you framing? What are you evaluating? What is this doing to the cinema? And we start looking at, well, this is how the structure is working. So it's based upon the state. It's grounded in the state. It's going to be influenced by the state. And so we start with state and we come back to state to see what's happening. It's a multiple feedback loop system. The primary state, we have input-output, stimulus response. The core metastate looping meaning making is this other matrix, and then each matrix has a system loop. The background matrices is the fact that all of these matrices are like the thoughts in the back of the mind. So that's how we can call them into being. You're experiencing this in relation to that, and this is what you're aware of. What's in the back of your mind about all of that? And people will generally tell you the matrix. Well, I just feel bad about that. You mean your sense of self, you. Somehow this is about you, and we hear the self matrix. Well, when I think about that, I just feel so powerless. I just don't know what to do. We hear the power matrix. When I think about this, it's like it's always going to be this way. We hear the time matrix. When I think about this, I know that people think I'm a fool. We hear the other matrix. So when people respond, they're responding out of one of these basic conceptual categories or matrices and all the frames that support it. And sometimes they'll say, they'll talk about all seven matrices. Or I just need to stop this. So they're in the intentionality matrix. They have an agenda now. And so when people respond, their words will be words from the back of the mind that are the invisible matrices that's driving all of this, and that's what they're conscious of. And sometimes we help to shift the system by sending them to another matrix, or by looking at that meaning-making matrix of how they are creating this meaning. So the matrices in the back of the mind, and they all influence the cinema. Matrix analysis. Well, you've heard of psychoanalysis. This is matrix analysis. We're going to analyze the matrix. Matrix analysis allows us to understand this as a system, as a neurosemantic system. How it works, what drives it, the spiraling loops, the leverage points. The matrix analysis allows us to identify the driving, the critical matrix within and behind each experience. Because if everything has a structure, has a form, then we can analyze what is the form and how does it work, and we can use this as a modeling tool. Matrix holarchy, instead of a hierarchy, we're going to talk about holons, and in this one, the whole shows up in the cinema. So the cinematic features here, the whole is informing this, and we'll find the part of the whole here, the whole in that part, and so the matrix is a holarchy. The levels of mind do not operate as a hierarchy, but as a holarchy. So thinking about that as a dynamic and fluid system. This is the very first example that Bob and I played with regard to this model, stuttering. It's in your manuals. You can see, I think it's in your manuals. You can see the diagram there. In this model, the very first thing that activates it all is words, or the attempt of words, or searching for words. And what do we call this? So we have to make some meaning out of it. Well, let's call it and punctuate it. Let's call it stuttering, or let's call it blocking, or let's call it something. So once I recognize, oh, that's what that is, then I'll have thoughts and feelings. I like that. No, I don't like that. And as I don't like that, or I attach some emotion to it, I'll evaluate it in certain ways. I'm looking foolish. Well, that just activated the other matrix. Or I'm looking foolish, the self matrix. Or maybe this means I'm flawed. Maybe this means I'm powerless, the power matrix. And so every time we make a little bit of meaning, it's activating, creating, and stabilizing frames, belief frames, value frames, understanding frames in each other matrix. And so as it activates the self, the power, and the other matrix, and then putting a person into state, feeling afraid of it, feeling anxious about it, feeling embarrassed about it. And then, well, what do I think about embarrassment? Well, what do I think about all these other facets? And it just starts spreading to the other matrices about my sense of the future, my sense of time in the past, my sense of job and careers and success and all those different worlds I live in. And then my intention. My intention is, I'm going to stop this. So my intention is, I hate this, I don't like this, I want to stop this. So the more I try to stop myself from the non-fluency, it just seems to add more energy to it, activates it more, and the more it gets activated, all the other things get activated. And this is a diagram that Bob has pulled in from lots and lots of statements from people who have experienced stuttering, and asking them, what do you think, what do you feel, what do you believe that are some of the frames that make this happen? And as Bob has gathered this, you can see that most fall into other, and then the next one is self, and then power. I'm broken, I am not enough, I'm inadequate, I'm flawed, I'm foolish, I'm worthless, I'm insecure, I'm timid, I'm shy, I'm anxious, I'm tense, I am shamed, I am possessed, I can't be enough, embarrassment, anger, just on and on in the self matrix. And in the other, it is not okay to stutter, fear of being rejected, expectations of others, inability to measure up to expectations. And so this becomes a template, and we can see where the energy is in self, in other, and self, and then power. So that's what really gets activated. And so now it makes sense as to the structure of it and what's driving it. And if you go to the very top there, the meaning-making one, the classification of non-fluency speech as stuttering, the anchoring of stuttering with fear and shame. Those tend to be the two big emotions. They're not the only, but the big ones. Evaluating it as bad and unacceptable, and framing it then has the meanings, particular meanings in these following matrices. So it gives us a sense of, how do you do this if I wanted to do this? Well, I'd have to punctuate it, feel bad about it, interpret it this way and that way, have this explanatory style, and then it could all create a nice mix at the end. So that's one way to think and utilize this system. So if I want to work with someone, I would want to work with the meaning making at the very beginning. Why punctuate it in that way? Why call it, label it, evaluate it that way? And what better meanings could we give to it at that level so that we don't have to start framing all those other matrices? So this is one example of using the 7 matrix. We've looked at phobia. To be able to do a phobia, you don't even have to have a feared object present. You just think about something that you decide is fearful. Of course, you're punctuating it as fearful. You're punctuating it as dangerous. You're bringing the emotion of danger to that, even in your mind. And how you represent it in the movie of your mind is that you're there inside the movie as the actor, the recipient of the threatening, dangerous thing. So in that funnel, we're bringing thoughts and feelings of fear, terror, dread to what we're representing. And of course, as we're doing that, we're forgetting that it's not now happening. So in the time matrix, the past is now. And we've stepped back in, we're fully inside the movie. This is how a phobia works. And of course, the power matrix will probably be activated a lot. I'm powerless. I can't do anything. I don't have resources. It's beyond me. And then I am a fearful person, or timid, or sensitive, or whatever the self matrix would do. The primary state of fear and anxiety just gets worse and worse. The past controls the present and dooms the future. And depending upon what we're afraid of, something out in the world, something about others, those matrices may get activated. And the intent, once again, is I've got to stop it. I've got to not think of it. Of course, that just makes it worse, and we go into loops. And then the system can start spiraling and be a runaway system. And the more we do it, the worse it gets. The worse it gets, the more we know I'm powerless. I really am powerless. I am flawed, and I can't do anything, and I am inadequate. And so the last thing any fearful person of a particular phobia will do is welcome it and bring it in so that they can think about it calmly, because that's what they can't do because they don't have the strategy, because the meanings they give to it. And the main meaning is that the past is now. This explains why the phobia pattern works so well. The very first thing we do is put that old movie on the screen. We're repunctuating. It's an old movie. When did that occur? What were you wearing that day? Who else was there? And what we're doing is indexing time. And as we index time and say, just the you of today, sit in the movie theater and just observe it. We're asking you to go into a different state at the primary level, comfortable eating that popcorn and watching it for the last time. And so now we understand what's going on. It's changing the whole matrix. So as we watch this, let's just float back out of your bodies to the projection booth, and from the projection booth, feeling our hands on that plexiglass, watching the back of our head, watching this old movie, and we're going to play it through and change it. We're accessing a state of control, state of power, state of I can do something about this. This is going to watch it for the last time, so play it through in black and white. And as it plays through, push it on a little bit further, let it play a little bit further to a scene of comfort, a scene of pleasure. And when you see that scene of pleasure, when you're there just having fun, step in there and rewind this. So we are changing the meaning making, changing the state, changing the significance and the sense of control, the sense of time. And that's why I think it works so well, which also illustrates that you don't have to go after the symptom directly. Playing the phobia cure, the movie, running it backwards in our mind, is a symbol and a metaphor that's very different from the symptom. The old way, the cognitive behavioral way, is to go right after the symptom. The symptom is this. So the direct way is, okay, relax. Get hierarchy of fears. Okay, feeling this, see the lowest one. And connecting. State with trigger, state with trigger, state with trigger. And that was how I did phobia and dealing with in the cognitive behavior way. Get a hierarchy of fears and teach relaxation and slowly connect them. Well, that's a slow way. It usually takes 3 to 6 months of desensitization to cure phobia in that way. So the symptom and the solution is different, because we're not going after it directly, we're going at it indirectly, but it's changing the matrices. And when you change the matrices, when you change how it's all structured, then the symptom is different. So in that sense, we're not going after the symptom directly. Oftentimes going after the symptom directly is what makes it worse. So when the person, don't think about this, don't think about it, they're dealing with the symptom directly. And I think the same thing probably with stuttering. Don't stutter. And when you do it directly, it tends to... So the attempted solution is the problem, or becomes the problem.
You're doing good, Art.
And this gives us wisdom that oftentimes, and it seems contradictory, it seems paradoxical, it seems strange that we don't go right after the symptom. We do weird and strange things. And yet it's changing the matrix. And once we know that we can change the matrix by doing these weird and strange things somewhere else in the system, running a movie backwards is a kingpin in the phobia. And you pull that out, and it's like, okay, try really hard. Try really hard. The last piece of the phobia cure is accessing that intention matrix. Try really hard. And so we're changing lots of things, and recognizing what's happening gives us I think, some new tools and new management. And I can see that from this, now we can start inventing lots of other strange and weird things that can change some old matrices. Bob and I, this is page 273, in order to be able to detect the matrix and to understand which matrix is being activated, have identified the metaprograms and the linguistic distinctions inside the matrix. And you can see metaprograms for self, metaprograms for power, resourcefulness, for other, for world, and the meta-model distinctions. We have now put the mind line distinctions, and we have put patterns. We have put NLP and neurosemantic patterns as, when this matrix is being activated, do this. When this matrix is being activated, do that. So as to be able to have a greater sense of what do you do when and where, and what are the cues, what are the linguistic markers, what are the neurological markers that indicate that the neurological energy, the neurosemantic energy, is at this matrix or that matrix. And so it gives us a way to handle this. I didn't even think about it. Bob brought it up that by 7 matrices around the self gives us a manageable model with 7 plus or minus 2 bits of information we can hold on to. So there's the matrix, at least the beginning of it. And does anybody even have one question? Anybody have less 7 or 2 minus less information? So we got, who's got the mic? Oh, we're not going to use the mic. So I'll repeat the questions after you say them.
Well, I've got 3 questions.
I had to hold it down.
Yeah, that'll hold me down. I guess we're looking at this model in 2 dimensions, and it looks like a 3-dimensional model, maybe more.
Right.
What does it look like from the top?
Uh-huh.
If you're above it, what does it look like? Could you sketch out? I mean, is it like a circle of matrices? Is there one in the center, or are they all? It's just a circle with connections in between them.
I have played with how to diagram this and how to look at it from the top or the side of the backwards. In my mind, it is 3-dimensional. I see, if you're looking at a person in a state, in a bubble, and that for the most part, all the matrix is invisible until it gets activated. So in my mind, and I've had some dreams where I see them activated, I've been color coding the different matrices so that when the self one gets activated, a certain color comes on and it's activated. It is cued by the language, it is cued by the descriptions and some of the neurology, but that it's just the bubble, it's just the sphere, and sometimes different colors come on and off, indicating different matrices being activated. So that's how I'm thinking about it, that is fluid, and that even though we could do the levels, and I draw it with the levels, I think about it as just immediate and direct because of the hold-on effect, so that when I peek into the theater of the mind and ask a person about that, it'll pop on and I have that sense.
Is there in one or the other?
And they're just moving around. So
That
sounds like a 4-dimensional model. That sounds like these things are all around you and they come into you.
Exactly.
They go through you, which is like a 4-dimensional hypersphere passing through our space and becoming a sphere that...
Yes, exactly. Hyperspace moving through our space.
Okay.
I can see that if I look down from the top, a ball going down one of those ramps, and then each time it hits a layer that's affected, it would then, come down. So as you look down, it'd be like a little steel ball going ding, 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 stopping at each layer. All of them connected by the ramp.
The ping pong model of the mind.
You got to take all those words. Microsoft Visio is we can get activated.
That was the whole point, I guess. It really needs a dynamic model rather than Visio. You really need to be doing something like Shockwave or
three-dimensional model.
That's
in Carl's
encompassing the
territory.
same space but changing colors, almost like a mood ring, or well, I mean, just
let's get Larry.
I was thinking of it as a 7-strand, like a double helix. Seven strands and connections going across for significant connections between, like you were talking about, self and power, or more.
DNA structure of cognition.
Yeah.
all about that.
So we have to think about it dynamically as something constantly moving, information coming in, it having effects upon us moving in different states. So what we do with calibration, calibrating how much energy, how much intensity, how much movement in reference to what, and there being some plasticity to it, so that where I go and how I'm spinning around and spiraling around, we can talk about that and demonstrate that, but it's going to come on and off, but it's always grounded in that primary state. So Deborah?
So the state is down there is primary.
What we call the primary state, the grounded state, is influenced and informed by all the higher matrices.
You made reference to the patterns that go with these different matrices. Is it in print somewhere?
It's in your book a little bit. If you look in the coaching one, the first time I'm going to be teaching this is in terms of coaching. How do you know what to do? So if you look in the book, you'll see a few, and that's just a few of the basic NLP, neurosemantic patterns for each matrix. We are expanding that to where we can put every pattern that we know of in some matrix, or maybe in a couple different matrices.
What excited me so much is we were sitting at the hotel restaurant in Sydney, and Michael laid this thing out, and I saw one model within the 7 ± 2 that we can organize absolutely everything that is in NLP and neurosemantics. All the books, everything that we've done and other NLPers and people have done can be put in this model, both as a diagnostic tool and with the patterns and the linguistic structures with the tools for resolving any kind of a disorder, mental disorder, any pathology. Also, as Michael will be doing in November in Sydney with coaching, which is called coaching, called therapy. It's all the same thing. It's changing cognition. This model, we can put it all, everything in, and we're doing it. It's absolutely, in my opinion, ingenious. What do you think?
Absolutely.
How about giving this man a hand? Michael will be assisting me, but Games for Mastering Stuttering in March at Limitless in Jeffersonville, Indiana, near Louisville. The training manual will be organized by this model. Can't you just see it?
Yeah.
You set up a little, just define it a little bit. Not be very complex, and then here's the frames of reference around self, and then we'll break off and we'll do a pattern or two on self. And of course, others was where all the real ones. We do others and self. We'll work in on there, and just structure the whole 3-day training right here. Then later, the book will be cut.
Can we pre-order training manuals from the coaching session in Sydney from you, so that when you're done with those manuals, that we can get copies of those? Since you're not going to be doing it here in the States till...
Now, the coaching manual is pretty much done now, and within a month I'll have that available. There will be a book called The 7 Matrix Model, and I've got about 100 pages now. I'll expand a little bit, and that'll be available about 2 months. And then from that, Bob's going to write the stuttering using that. And we're going to well, once you're in a genius stage,
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's long, but you know, I got other things to do.
2 months. It's better November.
And we would invite you, once we have this basic structure, if you want to write a book around this, because it can apply to hundreds of other kinds of things, as just a model that pulls it all together.
There's a little bit on the coaching, the table content.
You can see the most bare bones structure of it in your manuals.
It'd be great for animation. This is, I think, animation. And if you can't animate it in your mind, I don't see how you can really understand it. And if you can animate it in your mind and get it down, then you can pass it on.
Yeah.
Easy access to leverage linguistically.
So Bob was talking about a diagnostic model. This allows us to, and what he had up there earlier with the stuttering, to do some diagnosis. Because a lot of times in diagnosis with the meta model and other things, we get so much information, but how do you sort it? So now we're going to sort it there to see what's heaviest. Where is it semantically loaded? So if you think about semantically loading up a set of frames about something that then activates us into whatever states, the semantic loadedness is what a person will be talking about again and again and again, and then we'll know, well, this is where the energy is, this is where the semantic reactiveness is coming from. Then we can look for the kingpins, the linchpins of what turns it on, turns it off. And when we do that, then, and my sense is that oftentimes it'll be the smallest part of a system that'll have a reverberation effect throughout the whole system if you just pull that one piece or deal with that one piece.
With stuttering, it's primarily meaning at the top level is like Mark talked about, they punctuate it, is bad. Everything comes out of meaning. So with stuttering, rather than being fearful of it, welcome it. Rather than anticipating it, focus on the content of what you're saying. Let your mind body system do its job. I sent an email to Paul this morning with some instructions to continue on working. As you saw in the list in the Word document, and I'll try to remember to throw that over where I'll make you PowerPoint. By the way, that's incomplete, so that's for your use only. But we do a lot primary work here, here, and here. Great, right, Linda, Tim? And that's the better about to work with here, here, and here with stuttering. And with stuttering, I know some of you are new, were not here when I talked about it earlier. What I found out, I had a person come to me and say, "Can you help me? Can you help my son with stuttering?" I said, "I don't know. We'll try it." And it's one of those miracles that you get once in a while that keeps you encouraged. Had a 2-hour session planned. In 1 hour's time, it was fixed. When he realized he's doing it himself, he didn't do it anymore. And then I got to find out stuttering is just a panic attack expressed here and here. So, by the way, all of the pathologies are so simple in structure. That's how come we're so far ahead of a lot in other fields. Because all of them basic same structure, and right there it is. Right there it is. You can put any pathology. You can take the DSM-4, the book that I don't have too much high regards for. You can take everything in the DSM-4 and put it right there.
This gives us some understanding. Bob and I have had this conversation again and again in different places, why the drop down through to rise up is so powerful. Because you start with something in the primary state that is now physiological. And you drop out of whatever frame it is that's at the top, you drop out, so you step out of that frame. And wherever you are, then you drop out of that one, drop out of that one, drop out of that one. It's kind of like reversing the matrix. And when you do it kinesthetically, dropping underneath, dropping down, falling down through a frame to find out where did it come from, until you get back to where you're at ground level, you're at ground zero, in the sense of there's nothing here, there's the void, is the emptiness. And then, because we've set up that metaphor of moving to less and less and to the beginnings, then as the metaphor suggests that the next drop is going to be into something positive. So we do that a few times. Take that, rise up to bring that, metastate that. And so it really is undoing, kind of like the phobia thing. It's just a symbol and a process. But it gets right to the heart of what's driving the matrix.
I've been asking, we've been discussing how come the drop down through is so effective. I'm thinking, and I would appreciate some feedback from some of you. I'm thinking, in the old TD search model where you anchored in a state and went back and found the root cause, all learning is state dependent. So when the drop down through is an associative pattern, so you associate in state. So by being associated in that state, when you drop down through, remaining associated in each state you drop down through, it precipitates the uncovering of unconscious frames. It's the fastest model I've ever used to uncover unconscious frames that are driving the pathology. You give some thoughts and let me know what you think about it. We're also, because of the effectiveness of that model, we want to really tear that thing apart, so we can apply what we learn from it to the other metastatic pattern. You may want to talk about that.
Right.
I just got a question on there. Well, I just wonder if you two guys, by coming up with this model, have single-handedly upended the whole psychological model as we know.
Did that all day.
Turned it
That was
on
good.
its
I'm going to tell.
Single-handedly, I see 4.
Well, what I think.
I can't, it's his brain, not mine.
It was the intellect,
Yeah.
the interaction.
Once I heard
Synergy.
you drop and think laying on top of the drop down, when you get to the void, I almost see it as the void or the bottom or the ultimate as a cyclical thing, that it cycles to the top to a higher frame that then comes down and bears down on all the other frames that are there. So at least in my mind, the picture I have is really of a circle, getting down to the bottom and then recycling back on down through. I don't know if that's helpful for anybody, but that's the way I see it.
Yeah,
And
that's how
the
we
reason
dive
why
in.
I think it's so powerful is because, again, you're at the ultimate meta frame, and then you're working your way back down through all the meta frames that have been stacked with meaning in the past.
Right. So we've been calling it the drop down through to rise up. To rise up, and that's the piece that we've added. Bob has added the metastating piece at the end of the drop down, that we don't just drop down, but we rise up to bring new resources to those old matrices that then transforms that. And noticing how that
I
transforms
want to
it.
give credit where credit's due. I first learned that from Tad James in 1994. Of course, we've added the metastatic model to it since then. Stan, did you have a question?
I know our logical levels, we normally talk about them up, but yet when we look at the model, it's more that they're around each other. And I'm wondering, even though we're referring to it as a drop down and then to rise up, if it's more of a circular, or that might be that might also be, because it's all connected. Even when you're going down to rise up, it's still a connection, which is what.
And if we're going to think systemically, we have to think of those circuits and where we are in the circuits and what we're bringing at the next time through that circuit, etc., that allows the whole system to be self-correcting.
Going down to the tunnel.
Right.
You were describing that I was dropping down to the tunnel, just like Kim said, the ball dropping.
Yeah.
Drop down the tunnel here, it activates self, it activates other, it activates power, whatever was happening at that space and time in developmental history. When you drop down through, by the way, with that pattern, oftentimes you're just going back down through the person's past timeline, in a sense. See that a lot. Steve and Russ.
What I saw, Bobby, out of your sort of mirroring or laying across this model, or the drop-down method with the TD search is, in fact, since all the structure of the drop-down really they're tied into the main emotional feeling, the emotional end result that's causing whatever the pathology is, that in the TD search what you're really doing is you're anchoring one, but then as you move it forward in time, you're picking up all of the other ancillary meanings as they track forward in time. So the process seems to me to be fundamentally the same, but far more quicker, and I think at some degrees more ecological, because you're going to pick up real frames as opposed to, I don't know, not many.
Suggested ones.
Yeah, suggested ones.
How many of you have never done the drop-down through? Raise your hand. Stephen, would you like to take them one night and do it with them? Sure. Practice? That would be great. Stephen, let's see, Russ, and then Jose Luis.
What we have found with the drop-down through is because it starts at the primary state, we are essentially demeaning, taking away whatever that means. Drop down through there. And when you feel it, when you feel the dropping away of those meanings, of course the metaphor carries it, and the kinesthetic sense of dropping down through, that we're actually just stepping outside that frame, stepping out of this one, stepping out until we get to a place where I can remap. And for whatever reason it does, it can get things out of physiology. It can get things out of physiology.
I'll pull the pattern up here, basic pattern.
Which means physiology is informed and embodied by ideas. And if we take away the meaning, then the physiology will breathe different, act different, feel different, etc. Let's go to Russ first.
And let me, first of all, thank you for presenting Pavel. It's really helping me to pull some things together. I can see connections with studies done in energy medicine and how that relates to physiology. And actually, I'm visualizing it more as a series of connecting toroids, as opposed to this column that I kind of get disconnected from the column idea. But that flexibility of moving from one phase to another phase, and then being able to move up through each individual phase is what's really amazing to me, is what the models reach.
I was just wondering if, okay.
Jose was. Oh, Tommy, okay.
So, do you still use, instead of the drop down, what thought is behind that thought?
Well, we can. That's another one.
That's as effective?
No, the drop down seems to be much more effective. Because what thought is behind that, you have to use your conscious mind to figure it out. And the nice thing about the dropping down is that it's really the other part of your mind that, because you can't figure it out, you don't know where it's going to go. And so in that sense, we're getting the kind of thinking that created the problem, can't solve it, and we're dropping down through that kind of thinking, and dropping down through that until we get to the place where we're at a place where we can think anew. And now the thought behind that one, going to the thought behind, is more for someone who has enough ego strength to figure things out and is working consciously, whereas this one is working really outside of awareness.
My question was, just as in the phobia cure, when you reverse the syntax of the movie, it really messes up, and I wonder if the drop down through does the same thing almost kinesthetically. By reversing the syntax, it's immediately effective. Just wonder.
Good thought.
I think that's part of it.
Fantastic thought. Now, if you drop down through by the way, turn to Science and Sanity, page 27, I believe. You will read where Korzybski talked in 33 about there's a level which there's no meaning. We call that the void or the nothing. Okay, I believe page 27. Now, with CAD, when I first learned it, we just did the drop down through, and you repeat it 2 or 3 times, and it would just go away. We didn't, the metastating, we added that later when Michael come up with metastating model, which usually with that, you only have to do it 1 time, 2 at the most. But originally was down, so just dropping down through it into the higher frame. But by definition, when you drop down through it into the higher frame, you're going to meditate.
So the drop down through is kind of like standing on your head and dropping down through.
Alan! Alan!
He happened to be the output.
When you were talking about changing the semantics, the syntax, what you're also doing when you're going back down through it, as you're metastating it, the meaning in your body is changing because you're giving it an entire new meaning as you're layering that in. So the old meaning is taken out, replaced by that new meaning.
Well, we're coming up on lunch hour.
Yeah, the only thing I would add, Bobby, I've had the experience sometimes of going through and being very effective, but then there's another aspect that didn't get caught in the first drop down, and you need to work your way through that one as well.
Last time I did it.
Yeah.
Last time I did it. Another thing I've been using for 8 years, and with Metastates I've been using about 4 or 5 years with hundreds of clients. So you just start doing it, and your unconscious mind will let you know if you need to go to the side. Lots of times as I drop down through and uncover frames, I'll put a star beside those frames that I think I better revisit. And like I say, I think it was yesterday before I did it with the person, I put a star by, we get it up, and I said, now let's look at this frame here, because I knew it was a major frame, and I wanted to make sure that was cleaned up, and there wasn't anything else connected to it. But all I can say is, I can't teach you how to do it, and I'm still learning. You're teaching me right now. Is to start using it and start learning, and you'll know which direction to go.
One of the things with that, if indeed it does get things out of physiology, then start to play with anything in physiology that may be psychosemantically driven to see what happens. Last week we had a person here who could not go to the bathroom, who could not urinate in any public building. And so we did the drop down through. I did some other processes with him. And I would say, well, what does it feel there? And there's a lot of tightness, a lot of control. When we dropped down through and found the original mapping of that matrix, he had mapped it when he went at 5 years old into the bathroom. His dad was in the bathroom drunken and in a stupor and on the floor. And when he started to pee, his dad woke up, yelled at him, and now he's in his 30s, and for 25 years has not been able to pee in public.
Tell him about what, 2 days he went without drinking to fly here?
To get here, he did not drink anything for 2 days so that he could handle the flight, because he's not going to go on the plane. Well, he had mapped all kinds of things. Well, we put it to the test, and I told him on the way home, I said, on the last day here, you drink all day. But it was getting out of physiology, and he was able the last couple days to urinate fairly easily and regularly. But most of all, he took away that fear and that apprehension and that dread, and so it's just getting things out of physiology. But the pain and the distress of his stomach, and then all the things that he had been doing with regard to that.
Just thought about how a person had to plan their life around that problem. Yeah. When can I drink? And mind reading, in the time future. See, I'm going shopping. I may have to encounter this restroom or in a hotel or whatnot. And it's just like stuttering from the standpoint that you put this meaning on it, and then you start to live your life around not making phone calls, not presenting, changing your words as you speak. It's unbelievable how you can be imprinted, and then your whole lifestyle is affected by something.
Yes. The first day he came to see me, he was late, and he said, well, I waited in the restroom for 30 minutes trying to pee. I said, how much of your life do you waste with this stuff? And about the fourth day he was here, he came out of the men's restroom, come over. I was in the other room, and he come in there. I peed.
It was pervasive.
It was pervasive. That's fantastic. Now, can you imagine going your entire life? I'd like giving this man a hand.